Welcome back. Today, a very, very special episode of podcast style Endmyopia. We have on Dr. Julie Steinhauer, who is a licensed optometrist in the US in Illinois, and she has a very, very interesting take on myopia. We didn't talk before this interview at all, so this is completely, we are discovering each other and our take on myopia at the same time, and you get to witness it. I really hope you enjoy this episode with Julie.
So I'm Dr. Julie Steinhauer. I have a practice in Glen Carbon, Illinois, and I work with a lot of patients. We specialize maybe in helping our patients to be able to have the best vision that they possibly can have. And we use two methods of treatment. One is called vision therapy, and the other one is photosynthetic light therapy. So we use a combination of those two things together to be able to help our patients. And one of the things that I'm pretty passionate about is reducing lens prescriptions in my patients. And so I like to take them from high levels of lens prescription down to as low as I possibly can. In many instances, we're able to get them out of glasses altogether and maybe just get them into reading lens prescriptions. But certainly we have some patients that we work with on the end of being nearsighted and maybe even extremely nearsighted. So our goals there are to reduce as much as possible. We're very successful at that, and it's a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun working with my patients from all over the world. So
This is a very heretical idea. I'm sure you've been told before, right?
I get told on a frequent basis that I'm probably doing something crazy or wrong, and that's okay. I don't mind that. I kind of like to prove people wrong on things. It's maybe a bit of my personality, but when I get told that I probably can't do anything to help someone, I usually like to prove otherwise. And we've ruffled a few feathers with how much we change and alter lens prescriptions, but I think that's a good thing.
That is, I think so. Is it okay if I call you Julie? I should have asked first, probably.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
I don't want to. In different countries, there's very different rules on how to address certain titles and such. So.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So how long have you been doing this lens reduction method, and how did you come across this idea?
Well, I've been a doctor for 19 years, and I've been doing this form of treatment as far as vision therapy goes for 19 years. But it probably wasn't about until the last 7 that I really hit, I feel, on a successful method of treating patients to reduce their lens prescriptions. And I would even go so far as to say about the last 4, I've been really honing in on this craft of like, oh my gosh, I think we hit upon something pretty awesome here. So really about the last 4 that we've been able to pretty dramatically reduce lens prescriptions on a consistent basis.
That's awesome. And for those people probably don't realize, we connected on Facebook. We never actually spoke before, and we haven't like aligned our various planets. So this is a completely 100% unscripted, fortuitous encounter. How much do you know about us and Endmyopia and our strange ideas about reducing myopia?
Well, admittedly, I don't know a lot, Jake, because quite honestly, I think that I had some difficulties like with some of the links and things that I got from you. I was always like, what is going on? I can't find all the information. So there's some bizarro things. So, I mean, literally, this is, other than what, maybe 2 messages on Facebook, I think this is our first encounter.
And props to you. You're certainly open to this. I really kind of like, because I figured we were going to have more interaction beforehand, but I really liked how you were just like, yeah, we're going to chat on this day. And I like that we have the exploration of these ideas, because the short version of of endmyopia. I used to have -5 diopter myopia 20 years
Mm-hmm.
ago. And it finally got to the point where I just didn't want any more higher correction. I was told I needed higher correction. This was before internet. I'm a stock trader. I'm an investor. I'm far from removed from medicine as possible. And I just started reading biology books on how the eye functions and talking to optometrists, and I traveled a lot. And over time, I sorted out a way to reduce my myopia. It was very hit or miss. I did
Mm-hmm.
lots of things the wrong way. But along the way, I ran into like-minded people who were also interested in this, and it turned into this community. The website had over 1 million readers last year. The
Awesome.
Facebook group is relatively small. It's like 15,000 or so members. We had 7 or 8 million watch minutes on YouTube so far. Thousands of success stories of significant myopia reduction all the way back to 2020. And in the really short version of the method is we say only wear as much correction as you need.
Mm-hmm.
One pair of glasses for close-up, so you don't get into hyperopic defocus, you don't get a bunch of ciliary spasm, you get a little bit of challenge for your eyesight at that close-up distance. And
Mm-hmm.
one pair of glasses for distance, which are just reduced to where you can still see clearly and see people's faces and function normally, but you might be at, for example, say just 20/30, to where you're still challenging your eyesight regularly. And then on average, every 3 to 4 months, we found that people can reduce a quarter diopter. Of course, different for high myopia and low myopia, and if astigmatism is involved, but generally speaking, a quarter diopter every 3 to 4 months consistently works all the way till the last diopter. The last diopter can be a little bit more challenging, but most people overcome that as well. And that's been our approach. And we've been ridiculed to a huge extent by the optometry and ophthalmology field, even though I point to a lot of the clinical science that's all in optometry and ophthalmology journals that discusses axial length. We have people in our forum that have bought, one guy bought an IOL lens master. I'm sure you're familiar, and he's been measuring his axial length over the last year, and he's been tracking the reductions. And he's more of a clinical researcher type, so he's probably going to publish some of
Right.
that. But it is,
Yeah.
it's not that rare to find optometrists, at least, that are supportive, but it's very rare to run into Julie, who's actually doing the same stuff, but as a professional.
Yeah. So, and ironic, because as you were talking, I was thinking, I have been doing this for, like I said, for years, but I began the process for myself just recently. So what did I do? I began by, I've always kind of kept myself at a particular level of eyesight, and on the end of myopia, it is very important to have the lowest level of prescription that you can and function well. Some people want to see, I always say they want to see like the gnat on a whatever from 100 yards away. And that doesn't really help to reduce the lens prescription. It helps to aggravate the lens prescription. But I've always kept myself undercorrected to about 20/30 or even 20/40. I'm fine with it. Doesn't bother me. And you would be amazed at how many people can tolerate that very, very well. But there are certain types of people, certain professionals, even that are very specific about wanting to have more clarity of eyesight. So it's really hard for them to reduce theirs. But I will pretty much try to correct. I never correct anyone in the clinic ever below 20/25. And that's kind of gotten some fluff, and some questions over the years, but I always want people to have the ability, like their brain to have the ability to do a little bit of work in the situation to where they're not just given, a lens that says, I don't have to do anything at all in order to see well. So it does begin with reducing as much as possible. And in our method, so if it takes 3 to 4 months to kind of reduce a quarter at a time, what happens for us is from beginning to end, especially in farsighted individuals, I might have them from a +6 into no lens prescription in about 5 months. In nearsightedness, it is more challenging because they are a lot less likely to want to give up on it. So for instance, for like myself, I've got myself backed off, way backed off from what my actual lens prescription is. Part of it is due to the fact that it was starting to want to grow and change on me and get more. But then also because I felt like, it's this important thing for me to be able to show others that I am myself working on it. And, we're always the last ones to do anything for ourselves. I mean, I've treated I don't know how many countless people, but, gosh, I didn't give two thoughts too much about doing it myself. And so I thought, it's time. I really need to do that. And so I've backed myself way off in prescription. Now I haven't began the process just because we've had year-end stuff with our clinic and business and all of our patients. But I will start the process here in the new year once we get things settled out of utilizing photosyntonics. So the light therapy part is what electrically retrains the brain how to process information without the lens prescription. And then on top of it, there's actually a very well-known method of visualization and meditation that you can speed up this process tremendously. My daughter, actually, who is 11 years old, is beginning this process, and she was approximately 20/60 and measuring about a minus 150 in lens prescription. And I have not corrected any of that for her. I have given her only reading lenses. And we are going to also start the photosyntonics with her about the same time that mom starts it.
Very nice. But how many diopters are you starting out with in this journey?
Well, in my glasses versus what I want to be axial lengthwise are two completely different things. So in my glasses, I have myself corrected to a minus 375. And the other thing that's super important in myopia reduction is that you do not feed into the bear and cycle of craziness by going asymmetric. As soon as you go asymmetric, you are on a pathway of a snowball down a hill like a landslide. And so the problem is that I've been asymmetric my entire life. Way back when I started this beast of myopia in 3rd grade, I was asymmetric. And so I'm a 375. That's what I've given myself. I'm not technically that. And about a 4.25 for my left eye. What I would want to be in lens prescription is more along the lines of a 550 and about a 675.
I see.
So
how do you see on the chart with the current correction that you're using?
With my current correction, I am a wobbly 20/40, but I'm okay with that.
That's pretty good. That's amazing. Now, can I ask, so here's an interesting thing, because we have such a relatively large community, and I have a fair amount of optometrist friends all over the world. A general big problem is that, like, I noticed that you actually advertise this, that optometry boards take a pretty hard stand on what you're allowed to say and practice, especially if somebody complains. Have you found that that's not an issue for your practice at all?
Not an issue at all.
Nice. Because, for example, like a friend that I'm visiting in Hong Kong again soon, optometrist, the board actually said, you can never talk about this again. And it was we're taking your license because what you need to tell people, what you learn in school is, this is the correction you get. Myopia is not reversible, end of story. Because some of his colleagues got jealous that his business was going pretty well. And the only way he got to keep his license is to never promote stopping myopia progression in this
Mhm.
way or reversing myopia. And that's a big hurdle for us because a lot of people won't take the stand to talk about the things you talk about.
Well, I can't say that it is something that I just browbeat all the time. I'm not, I'm not hammering the pathway about it nonstop. Um, and maybe for that reason, it hasn't, I don't know, it hasn't ruffled feathers. But I think the thing is that, gosh, if there's so many doctors who are doing this, vision therapy stuff, and we are basically saying like we can retrain the brain, then we need to be very realistic about the fact that you can reduce a lot of things. And I think that we need to be very realistic about that we can gain control of a lot of things that seemingly seem to go out of control. And I think it's a very big disservice um, that we don't mention it, that we don't say something about it, that we don't talk about it. I am continually amazed at the doctors that I do come in contact with, that I get phone calls with saying, they'll say, so a patient of mine ran across a video of yours and is saying that you can reduce lens prescriptions, and you know, I've never heard of this before. And I'm like, how can you not hear about this? If you work with altering the brain and changing how the brain functions, I just don't even understand how more people don't get this. It doesn't even seem logical that more people aren't doing this. And to me, again, I think it's a disservice to allow our patients to just go willy-nilly down this pathway of, gaining 1, 2. I have a young patient who's, she's around 9, 10, 11 when we've been working with her. And she just is so far down the road of nearsightedness to continue to let her gain 2 and 3 diopters of nearsightedness every single year is, I think it's in the form of malpractice even, because I think that we should not even allow that to occur. There has got to be a stopping point. It's dangerous because as we also know, when we increase axial length, we have the potential for, a retinal detachment and holes. And so someone who's 9, 10, 11 years old should not even be in the category of that. Shouldn't be even on the radar of a possibility for their future.
Yeah, it's truly amazing. I talk about this a lot because if you look at clinical science, right, you go on Google Scholar and you type in lens-induced myopia, right, like minus lenses causing the progression of myopia and how that mechanism works, you get more than 50,000 search results that only point to clinical science and study references, but the mainstream of optometry and ophthalmology still says it's a mysterious genetic condition. I'm like, your own journals and publications clearly state what causes the progression of myopia. How is this not, like, exactly what you're saying? It's so refreshing to hear somebody in the profession speak sanity, you know?
And I think that, oh, we're going to get joined by my cat here. I think that there are certainly a lot more. Maybe I should have put them in the other room. I didn't think about that.
No, it's fine.
I think there are a lot more doctors out there who do believe, as I do, who are very successful in reducing lens prescriptions. Again, I think that we do so many things that maybe, again, they're not necessarily highly focused on it, because there have been some wild reports in the past from people of, I guarantee I can get you out of lenses, and that, that never ever goes over very well. And so we don't make those claims ourselves in our clinic. Our goal is to greatly reduce as much as possible a lens prescription. I mean, again, we're super successful at doing that, but it's not something that I say like, Just get rid of those nasty glasses that some person that doesn't know what they're talking about gave. You know, we don't do any of those things, so we're not trying to fly in the face of general optometry. We're just
Yeah.
saying that, look, there are clear methods that work of reprogramming the brain to reduce your lens prescription, and in a lot of cases completely get rid of it. And it's not for everybody. It is certainly not for those who don't believe. And for number two, it's certainly not for those who, you know, don't want to try something different. If they
Yeah.
don't want to try something a little bit out of the box, then it's not for them.
How many other professionals do you know or deal with that are on the same kind of track?
Well, I think that there are certain groups within optometry. So, you know, of doctors who do what I do in the United States, and this is rough estimates. I took these years ago, so I haven't even looked at these numbers for like the last 7 or 8 years. So they could be off. But like 7 or 8 years ago, you know, if we had maybe 45,000 optometrists in the US, and then approximately 4,000 or so of us were doing vision therapy, then maybe this group that I belong to was pretty small. It was going to be consisting of less than about 500 doctors. And those numbers are changing certainly all the time. But for those of us who really get into the nitty gritty of going, I think that we can do this, you're not going to find a whole lot. And so it isn't something that you're going to hit upon a ton of doctors doing these types of methods.
Sure, and because I'm familiar with behavioral optometry as a subgroup where there is a lot
Sure.
more open-mindedness, but it isn't as targeted, it's not nearly as specific as what you're saying, which is not identical to our approach, but it's very close, right? Like the premise is more or less the same. And it's really random and fortuitous that we ran into you on Facebook. I think some of our members pointed you out and mentioned that you were doing similar things. And then I looked at your website and I'm like, that's really interesting that you're in the same general direction. And I really wanted to talk to you because it's so rare. And I don't understand how it's so rare because the clinical science says like the axial length of the eye goes in both directions. And the human eye has been measured in studies as showing that it doesn't just elongate, but if you reverse the stimulus, the length also reduces. So the idea that myopia is reversible isn't really that far-fetched when ophthalmology clinical science has shown the human eye's axial length to change in both directions. And seeing somebody actually applying that in practice is super great.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, it's been fantastic. There are people who reach out to us specifically for those services, but I have to tell you that more often than not, most of the people that come to us have no clue, that that's something that can even be done because it's just not talked about traditionally. And that's okay, I guess, I suppose, but I think that we need to kind of talk about it more because there are more individuals that are looking for things outside of the box. I think there are more individuals who don't necessarily just want to go along with like status quo of everything. And, again, it's not for everybody. Some people would rather just have like the simplistic fix for everything. And that's okay. There's a place for each and everything. I think my fascination and my passion from it comes from the fact that, I felt like I really wasn't necessarily given a choice or an option. No one really knew about it. And I was just put into glasses and progressively stronger glasses every single year until, oh, hey, I'm pretty significantly nearsighted. And by the way, I'm pretty significantly asymmetric. Thanks for that. No one really kind of caught those things and how that happens and why that occurs. And so I'm really big on educating my patients on why people become asymmetric, why you want to stop that, and anything that I can do to reverse it, because well, I just think, why should we not, for one? but you know, to think that you can stop someone from needing to wear glasses for a lifetime and be stuck with that is, I think it's just like a part of my duty. I think it's part of my duty. If I know how to do it, I think I should do it.
Yeah, and you're right. And these are, again, like I always feel somewhat out of place, and I've for the longest time assumed eventually us doing this is going to be replaced by optometry and ophthalmology. It hasn't so far. But like you mentioned, for example, ocular dominance, right? Like I rant so much about this when you get your first lens correction. It's in the 1 point something diopter range, that so many who create these prescriptions don't recognize that ocular dominance occurs not naturally, normally in everybody, right? So if you have 1.25, minus 1.25, and a minus 1.5 in a first quote unquote prescription, it's like, that doesn't make sense, because one eye is dominant, right? So one eye is going to have greater acuity than the other. So the correction should be even. There shouldn't be what you're calling asymmetry, shouldn't be happening, because ocular dominance just happens. Like astigmatism, like when we look at studies of actually looking at the corneal surface and where there truly is astigmatism present versus just somebody who's picking lenses and asking you, is this better, is that better? And they threw some cylinder in there and the person wasn't sure, and now they have quote unquote astigmatism where they don't necessarily really do. And we end up with a lot of that, where people have these really complex diopter corrections that, when you look back through the history, started off very simply.
Well, I think the group that you alluded to, like behavioral or developmental optometrists, are most often going to be the doctors who are going to be looking at these things and saying, is nearsightedness or astigmatism is emerging. If we kind of can, you know, get our hands on them first, then we're going to do something to kind of control that. Yes, there is the issue a lot of times of things starting off asymmetric, can be due to ocular dominance, can also be due to physical positioning, which is what I find to be the case most of the time. And it seems so silly and so simple and unbelievable that most people are like, what? That isn't the case. But if you've got someone, a child in school, who's going through visual stress and they're sitting there like this part of the day, and they're blocking eyesight from one eye, or they end up laying down, or they lay on the couch sideways to watch TV, and one eye, based on positioning of my head being like this while I'm reading, having to focus harder at a greater distance than the opposite eye, is what most of the time sets us up for asymmetry. And so, you know, as a youth, as a kid, I was reading in bed and I'd lay on my side at night, and, you know, that wasn't really something anyone thought about to talk to me about, but that's the reason why I'm asymmetric, because my right eye was closer. It didn't have to focus as hard, but my left eye was farther. It had to focus farther. And so it had to invoke more accommodation. And so that's why the asymmetry began. And the reason why most, not all, but most cases of astigmatism began are because of visual strain and stress. And so it simply is a stress response for the eye to kind of start almost flexing and changing its shape on the corneal front end. And then we end up going into the doctor and we're like, oh yeah, you know, I mean, you've got a little bit of astigmatism starting. The interesting thing on that one is, most of the time, if you were to retest that patient, and if you had them sit and meditate for half an hour and retest them where they were in a relaxed and controlled state, the astigmatism may be gone, or it may be at a completely different axial position And even if you tested them 24 hours later, it could be completely different. And so a lot of times, again, not saying anything, negatively as far as what that doctor does, but a lot of times we're taking a clip moment shot from what happens in a stress related incident, and we're getting the induction of astigmatism, and then we're prescribing that, and then it is something that sticks with us. Where what we look at is we say, especially if we get kids, it's much easier because many times they have not been indoctrinated in lens prescriptions long, or maybe they haven't at all. And that's the most ideal position for me, clearly, is that I can say like, oh, you've only had these glasses for 2 years. Well, let's just get rid of that. Or if I say, well, oh, thank goodness you haven't even had glasses yet for this correction. Let's just get rid of that. So it's really, we have to realize astigmatism is a stress response and myopia is a stress response. And so if the eyes were working well as a team, these things would never occur. And so if we remove the stressor, then we shouldn't really treat the symptom. We should treat the true root of the cause, as opposed to the thing that is just a symptom of a much larger problem.
That is heresy. Terrible. I own a bunch of lens stock because that's more my business, really, is trading and being in the market. And I've seen the trends for many years, and it's just one of those where it's $100 billion a year industry just selling symptom treatment, right? Like it makes a lot more sense. And especially like on the business end. Oh, and I'm curious about this too, because things like seat time, especially when we're dealing with big franchises and big operators, I get a lot of the behind the scenes emails and a lot of the things that optometrists are being pressured to do. Like, how many minutes can this person sit in a seat before there has to be a prescription created and before glasses are sold? Do you find yourself insulated from the price pressure from online lens sales by your practice that seems to be a lot more focused on solutions than just selling glasses?
Yeah, I'm not a traditional optometry clinic. When I started off, I did everything. So I had my vision therapy specialty within my clinic. I did that for 9.5 years. And then I stopped doing that. And instead, I just walked completely away from traditional optometry. I don't manage disease. I don't sell glasses. I don't sell contact lenses. So I have no interest in those things. But I write lens prescriptions based on functional needs for my patients, and they can go take those elsewhere. And so, yeah, so for me, that's not something, glasses are not in my clinic. And we have a 3,000 square foot clinic, and we have no frames. So they can't buy from me. I go send them to my colleagues. And, and I have to say, I think all of this comes just from, what are we taught? We're taught in school, and I've always kind of been a person who's thought outside of the box. And so when I learned things in school, I was like, some of that just doesn't match up. It doesn't sync up for me. And so I was always the one who was like, okay. And then, behind the scenes, I'm like, let me go figure out what makes sense to me, because that doesn't make any sense. But, that's okay, because everyone has to have a basis, and they do a wonderful job at training the basics. But for those of us who want to think a bit outside of the box, we have to go elsewhere for that, and that's totally fine. And my colleagues and those who do this sort of thing are just doing the best that they know how to do. They've not really been trained in the model of thinking outside of the box for this sort of thing. The real interesting thing is that it still would be a very lucrative thing for lenses and glasses and all of that if we were just actually utilizing them for functional treatment, as opposed to the Band-Aid type of situation. And so if we're still just treating functionally, it's not like we're losing money. It's not like we're taking away from that industry. So it's not really, I don't think it's something that needs to remain or worried about like taking away part of the income from our profession. I think quite the contrary. I think that there would be still a lot of funds and money to be made in this, but we're using them in a correct fashion. And so, I use glasses. Obviously, at this point, I'm still nearsighted as I reduce my lens prescription, but I would still continue to use them when I get to the point where I'm needing them less and less, because there are great things. We can reduce with an anti-reflective coating glare and reflections. We can protect our eyes from blue light with the blue filter on our lenses. And I think there are many things that glasses are still needed for. And so there's no, like on my end, I'm not trying to take away from that, but what we are trying to do is for the individuals who really want to think outside of the box again and maybe reduce or get rid of their lenses altogether. Well, we have a method of doing that, but I still prescribe glasses for every single patient. I just prescribe them on the end of functional things to help reduce their eye strain and continue to allow their brain to process in the correct way so that it doesn't go down these pathways of eye strain and inducing astigmatism and more nearsightedness. So I'm still prescribing. Every one of my patients gets a lens prescription that I say, go visit, my great friend across the street or my great friend down the road, or, so I'm still doing that because it's very important. There are certain things that need to be protected from the side and standpoint of our eye health. And, going without is not necessarily the best option. So again, I think we have to look at it from multiple levels, and maybe the standpoint that our profession gets very fluffed and upset about is the thought that, we're trying to remove an area of, compensation, and that's really not it at all. It still is needed. It still is very necessary.
I like that you're very diplomatic. Also, you have a much better way of expressing ideas than, for example, I do. I'm somewhat infamous for terrible rants.
Oh no, I have them.
But I'm kind of allowed because I am outside of the profession, right? Like I don't have a title. I don't have the responsibility. I kind of have the freedom to, which probably isn't necessarily a good thing, but I love how you're diplomatic about it. And I think you probably make a lot of friends by not selling the lenses yourself, but referring out business. So that's also a great strategy to make this kind of practice work in a local environment where there are other people that are focused on other parts of that business. Like they sell the lenses, you deal with the more functional approach. That's all. I really like your approach to this whole thing a lot.
Yeah, I utilize, in fact, just as taking, for instance, this young patient that I have who's very, very nearsighted and just keeps gaining, gangbusters. There are many, many things, and I used to do them in my old clinic, but I would prescribe like a gas permeable, which used to be a rigid gas permeable or an RGP lens, a hard lens. Those are all some of the terminologies it goes by. But I used to prescribe them in order to control myopia. So once upon a time, my thought process was more about controlling it, stopping it. And now it certainly is still that, but it's gone much farther than that. And hey, what can we do to reduce it and get rid of it in cases, if that's something that they're interested in? But I'll turn them on to my colleagues, and I refer on a, when it comes up, if it's a regular basis, I will refer them out to be fitted for a gas permeable lens, because it will stop this crazy axial length growing. And if you can kind of stop and arrest that, then that's the beginning of reducing it. And so gas permeable contact lenses are very, very helpful in this process, particularly those who are very nearsighted. If we're getting up above, and I consider very nearsighted, I mean, I'm on the cusp of very nearsighted with my like 5s and 6s. So I think whenever you start going from 6 to 9, that's whoa, that's extreme danger zone. Anything above 9 is like, wow, this is like, get out the resuscitator, because we've got a huge problem. We have something extremely, extremely serious. And so, really anything over a 6 to me, if it's moderate to me, is 3 to 6. And unfortunately, but that's just because that's what we see on a regular basis. Once you start prescribing,
do you see any chance of this reaching more of a mainstream appeal, or an avenue for this to get out there more from a standpoint of where you're at, for more professionals to partake in this kind of dialogue?
I think what is difficult is getting over the mindset. I think getting over the mindset, because it takes a mindset of medicine versus functional medicine. And so if we go traditional medicine, then that's more the model of glasses and everything else. But if we go non-traditional, functional medicine, chiropractics, supplements, meditation, what are other methods of, healing and correcting things within our body that aren't mainstream, it takes a mindset that's not mainstream. And there's always going to be the place for both. So we're not ever going to replace the medicine side. It won't happen. But I do believe that we're seeing a major shift towards the functional medicine aspect that is a lot more mainstream now. When I began, I can remember probably about 8 or 9 years ago, when I began using the photosynthetic light therapy in my clinic. I was in a little bitty town. Our population was less than 10,000. And, I would have people come in and I would say, we're going to use this light therapy stuff. And, they'd be like, we're going to what? We're going to what? I was looked at like she's a wackadoo doctor. And I moved to a slightly more progressive area. I say slightly, as largely a lot more progressive area. And when I moved to this more progressive area, it was like, oh, that makes sense. That's pretty exciting. Wow, let's do that, and so I think depending on even location of where you are, I think the mindset can be different about functional medicine versus traditional medicine. And again, not saying there's not room for traditional medicine. There totally is, because it's definitely valid and it's warranted and needed. And so we're not trying to trample that out, but we're saying that there is a lot to be said for traditional medicine, but there's a lot to be said for functional cures on things. And we could have a whole nother conversation on all kinds of things that, get people fluffed up too, but talking about functional things. But I think that you are going to find more and more doctors. The biggest problem is mindset. The second biggest problem is what we've been taught that we have to overcome. And the third biggest thing is this is not something that is a fast fix. And in the world, many times there are always going to be those individuals who are ready for the fast fix. And so the fast fix method is just to treat the symptom that you're having. Oh, you can't see at distance. Let's treat that. Let's get you seeing better. And for those, again, it's needed. They need something to be able to function. So that's great for them. But for those who are saying like, you know, I don't want to go traditional. I don't really want to just kind of do what the masses say. I want to do something slightly different. Well, then this clearly works, but it's not fast. I mean, if you've got someone who's a -9 in nearsightedness coming to you saying, Jake, how can I reduce this and get rid of this stuff? Well, what you said is it reduces a quarter about every 3 to 4 months.
A decade.
That's going to be a process.
Yeah.
Right.
But what we talk about a lot is it's not about 2020. It's about lifestyle changes, like the screen time, like the staring at the phone, right? It's not just about it's bad for your eyes, but it's also bad for you, right? Like a lot of these things that create progressing myopia, it's not just about you have high myopia, you're making lifestyle choices inadvertently that are not good for you, and with better habits your eyesight improves. So even if it takes you a decade, I mean, maybe you have a faster way, but our way, right, like it'll be a quarter diopter every 3 to 4 months, but then 10 diopters, 9 diopters will be slightly less correction, like 8 diopters. So every diopter is going to give you a better picture of the world, right? There's going to be less distortion. The lens is going to have to do less work. You're going to have ongoing successes along the way. So because I get that a fair amount when people are like, that takes too long. I'm like, don't think about, you know, like the end result, but all along the way, you're going to have so many things. You're going to, like I just talked to a guy who has got 3 kids. And one of the things he said is, I took out a lot of my smartphone time that I now spend with my kids, right? Like that's really the bigger picture than just the lenses and the degree of myopia.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think, and that's huge in our clinic because we have kids that come in and, you know, they are on their phones. I mean, it's most of my parents, most of my families, if they're coming to me, they're controlling it. Most of them are putting stoppage on the amount of time that their kids are doing these things, but some aren't. You know, I mean, if they're looking for functional cures for things, most of them are pretty savvy to say, like, I want to control this. We don't let them do more than, you know, an hour a day or something like that. But some families who come to us, that's really not on their mind. And it's nothing for their child to be on a screen for 6, 7, 8, 9 hours on a weekend day.
And like at this distance, right? Like I see toddlers holding on iPads like this. It's terrible.
Right, correct. You know, in my family, my kids, I have an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old. And in fact, this was the topic of conversation just this week. My daughter was on a kick of, Mom, she's been telling me she wants to have a gecko. And I'm like, we've got 2 cats. We're not going to have a gecko. And then, you know, we had this big, long conversation. So the other night I sat them down. I'm like, listen, guys, we're going to have family confab here. We're not going to have a gecko. We're not going to have a turtle. We're not going to have a moth that's going to turn into something, you know, beautiful. We're not going to have, you know, and I named like a bazillion animals. And they were like, Mom, we'd never have a porcupine. I'm like, I don't care. We're getting this out in the open. No porcupines. And then the conversation went on to, but when can we get an iPad, or when can we have our own laptop, or when can we have our own phone? And I was like, you know, I'm going to be that mean mom. You're not going to have it until I think you're ready for it, for one. And for number 2, it's not that we don't have technology. I'm on a phone right now, and you know, I have multiple iPads laying around, and we've got our laptop sitting over on the counter. So it's not that we're adverse to technology, but I'm like, you know, 6-year-olds don't need to have their own phones. And I know that's very non-popular, But that's the way that I look at things. They don't need to have those. There's so many reasons why they're dangerous for 6-year-olds and for young children to have them. It doesn't mean they can't ever use them, but there's a danger zone there that we have to really be careful attention to. And it's not just what it does to the eyes and what it does potentially to our brain. I could talk about that in just a minute. But, you know, I mean, there's just the real thing there of there are creepy people in the world that we have to be careful of. And so there are things like that that we have to be cautious of. But I'm like, you know, we're not going to do that. You're going to be a certain age before you have that. And so in my household, you know, I'm like, that's something that unfortunately, you know, my kids don't get that time. They go to grandma's and they get a little bit of time there. They're normal kids. They play on YouTube and they do all this kind of stuff, but they do more of that stuff whenever it's not with mom, because mom's like, no, we're not going to do that. You know, we're going to talk and we're going to like read, you know, books. Like I'm reading to the kids. We read about like vibrational money or The Secret, or, you know, we're reading about meditative things, or we're reading about stuff. I'm like, you know what, when your friends want to make fun of you because you don't have your own phone, ask them if they know about what their net worth is. Ask them if they, because my kids know. And I'm like, ask them if they, you know how to visualize in order to change their lives. Ask them if they have, you know, methods and if they know what their chakra centers are in their body. Ask them if they have some of these things. And so, you know, I mean, again, this can be like a whole nother conversation of many, many things. But certainly we have to look at getting things we have to look at functional medicine becoming more mainstream.
Yeah.
And I think that we're seeing that.
That's awesome. I think we certainly have small differences in details of ideas, but I think that's perfectly fine. There's a million ways to get to the same end result, but I really like what you're saying. I really like what you're saying about questioning some of the education that happens and questioning what happens with the biology and questioning the need for just treating symptoms. If people want to learn more about your approach, what's the best way to find you? Is it Facebook, website? What would you recommend?
Yeah, we're in the middle of reworking some things and revamping a lot of things. They can find us on our website at visionforlifeworks.com. They can certainly find us Vision for Life on Facebook. We're on all social media kinds of platforms. You know, the thing that we're doing really is we're utilizing the natural brain ability electrically to reprogram the brain. And that's how it's working. That's how it's changing. That's how it's so dramatic of a change. And, but we are incorporating for those of us who want to do it. So for those of our patients who want to kind of create this lifestyle, like what you're talking about, of like making habitual changes in everything with their life, so that it becomes something that's just part of their life now. They don't even think about not eating healthy. They're thinking about everything that they do, the amount of time they're on the screen, what they're eating. They're thinking about the things that they're putting themselves in front of. They're thinking about what they're listening to, what their eyes are seeing. You know, am I listening to the negative news nonstop all the time? They're thinking about all of those things. And it becomes much, much larger than just reducing a lens prescription, right? So, I mean, it's really, I think it's really a whole mental well-being and a whole holistic approach to the entire body and to the well-being of an entire individual. And so, I mean, I applaud you for what you're doing. I think it's amazing. I didn't know the background of you, you know, being in the financial market. I mean, I think that's pretty phenomenal that a person who comes from something like that, which is a completely different world, it's a totally different world than the medical type of world and all of the things that go on with the body. But it usually is, what I find, it usually is individuals such as yourself who are like, man, I want to have the best of everything. It's not just about, it's not just about creating a lifestyle through finances and that's all fantastic. Everybody wants that, but it's more, because if I have that, but if I don't have my health, what do I have? And so I think it's phenomenal that you have looked at a completely different side. You've immersed yourself in studying and reading and gaining knowledge from the aspect of medicine and from the aspect of clinical trials and digging into what's really out there, because sometimes it's hard to find.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to.
In a way, it's easier for me because I didn't have the bias, right? Like I didn't have the education that said, this is what it is. I was looking at it from a perspective of, I have these glasses. I want to understand why. I want to understand the cause. And I come from a completely different kind of world and business. But what I do all day is analyze what is going on, right? Like, so I'm not very easily swayed by just do this and don't ask questions. Like I ask questions. That's my job, is to ask questions. When you start asking enough questions, just as you have, obviously, you get to the same answers. And since I didn't have the bias of an education that would have told me otherwise, and because I have this analytical tool set that I use in general, and I had the strong motivation to do it, I got there eventually. But what's way more exciting is now there is, over 1 million people have been on Endmyopia last year. Like it's crazy. And I get on average about 700 emails a day from people asking questions or posting improvements. Like we have just endless improvement reports. So I'm very encouraged by that, but I want more of Julie, right? Because I am not that guy. And it's never going to be my practice. It's never going to be my profession where people can come see you. And I will post links to your Facebook and links to your site, so people that are semi-local to you or that want to travel to you can reach you and can have this interaction with somebody who's in the field and who is meant to be doing this professionally.
Yeah, well, we have patients and clients all over the world that we work with. So people do find us. Sometimes they travel to us, and sometimes we work with their doctor. It takes finding the right doctor to actually want to work cohesively with us to be able to help their patient. But, I work with patients. We have patients in China right now because we work with their doctor and with someone who's open and willing to help their patients. And we have a patient in Germany that I've spoken with their doctor, and he's like, I've never heard of this. I didn't even think it was possible. This is like crazy. And we're helping to teach him. And in the US, I have doctors who call me and who are like, what is this stuff that you're doing here? I just don't, this is not like, where's this grounded in? And I'm like, well, it's grounded in science, but so we do work with clients from all over, much like yourself. You're getting emails and that from all over the world of people saying like, what do I do? How do I do? And the same thing happens for us too. Because as soon as you start talking about it, there are people who want these types of services. And, I think it's exciting. I think one of the other things that we have to get over the hump is that there are many that have a very limited mindset, in that if we kind of walk into their sandbox or in their play area, that we're maybe taking from them, right? But what you're finding out is you have a totally different line of business. And yet this has become a business or a beast kind of like all on its own of helping individuals, right? This has taken off way more than probably you ever thought. But that's exciting because there's a place for everything. And there's a place for what I do, and there's a place for what you do. And I think, we have to think about like how many billions of people are there in the world. And I can't be worried about Dr. So-and-so from New York who's concerned that I'm going to step on his territory, or Dr. So-and-so down the street from me. Like, there's billions of people who need our services. We need to be focused on serving the masses because there's so many. We can't help everybody. And there's a piece of the pie out there for everyone
I
and what
think
they're doing.
I think we should make this like a regularly occurring thing. Like we should chat every so often because you're the diplomatic one and you're putting a much more positive spin on things than I do sometimes. And it may benefit everybody because I come from a weird place. I'm comfortable with it. I'm comfortable with my role as an outsider. But I think it's also really great to have your perspective. And as you're talking, I always enjoy how you're able to make the same points, but in a much more diplomatic way that is much more inclusive and that I think will resonate with everybody, whereas I'm a little bit more divisive sometimes.
It's okay. I mean, I think what happens in my world in optometry, I'm considered to be more divisive because, you know, because some of the things that I'm doing are a little unconventional. I mean, when we started doing YouTube videos and we started doing some of that stuff, to be honest, there weren't a lot of doctors doing that. And so, I was like, don't give away all the secrets. What are you doing? And I'm like, it's a 2-minute clip. I'm not giving it away. They're not going to be able to just do it on themselves at home from what I say. And now, like, everybody in the world is on, social media doing videos. And so when I was doing it, it was not cool. I was back when it was not cool. Now is very, very exciting and appropriate that literally every doctor out there that wants to make the name for themselves is kind of out there doing what we're doing right now. And so in my world, I'm a little bit more, hot button, like, she's kind of pushing the buttons a little bit. And, but maybe to the person who's not inside of optometry, I look a little bit more diplomatic in my approach, and that's good.
Yeah, at least how you present it. All right.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I really appreciate you taking the time to be on. I will, like I said, I will link for those who want to find you, who want to maybe come visit you, who want to use your services, they'll be able to find you through the links. And maybe if you feel like it, we'll be able to connect again, because I think we could get way more in depth on some of these topics.
Absolutely. I think that I'm of the opposite mindset. I think that the more that you educate, the more that you empower people to make their own decisions. And so I'm not worried that people will go out and try to do, if they want to try to do stuff on their own, I think great, go out and try to do things on your own. That doesn't take away from me. I think that people such as yourself figuring things out on their own it's really how the world works. It's how we have all these cool inventions that we get to use all the time. And I think it's how we progress things. And so I think it's great that individuals that are like-minded from two totally different things can come together. And I say, let's do it. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julie. And maybe we'll see you again soon.
Okay, sounds good.
And there we have it. That was fascinating, I think. We keep in mind here that we didn't have this conversation to enforce some kind of the Endmyopia way is the right way, right? Like, this is more of a keep an open mind to hear somebody in the profession who's stepped outside the box and has been looking for other answers. And if you found Endmyopia, you're kind of spoiled because all the answers have been laid out for you that have been experienced by many thousands of people. I think Julie hasn't had that luxury. Like, there hasn't been this level of feedback. She has obviously great experience. She obviously is on her own track and she's building her own system around this. So I hope you enjoy this take. And I personally enjoy this take because anything that's different from what we're doing, but also headed in the direction and using science and using an understanding of the biology is always fascinating to me. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'm kind of tempted to have more of these conversations. After we hit stop recording, we got into it a little bit with some ideas that she has that I'm not necessarily sharing, and I think really fascinating stuff that could be a great starting point for other conversations. So if you enjoyed this, leave comments. Let me know and let Julie know whether it's worth for us to continue this dialogue, and hopefully we'll be able to do more of this. That's it for this one. See you in the next one.
Meow, 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 meow.